Truistery Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistery Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. The rain came down in silver needles over Sable Heights, blurring the skyline into soft charcoal streaks. It was one of those slow-burning days, the kind that seemed to hum with an invisible tension. Inside the glass tower of Wolf Atelier, the tempo was no less intense. Seraphina Quinn's heels clicked softly on the polished concrete floor as she made her way into the executive suite. The emails had been relentless all morning, and her temporary contract was almost up. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was just filling in for a senior assistant on maternity leave. But somehow, in just a few weeks, she had become indispensable to Callan Wolf. Callan was not an easy man to work for. Sharp-edged, guarded, and infuriatingly composed. He had the unnerving ability to make people question themselves with a single raised brow. But Seraphina had learned to navigate him, not with flattery, but with brutal honesty and unwavering competence. He respected that, maybe even admired it. This morning, though, something was off. When she entered his office, she found him slumped slightly at his desk, one hand pressed to his temple, the other still gripping a pen, as if he were forcing himself to finish a draft. "Mr. Wolf," she said gently. His head lifted slowly. His usual cool steel gaze was dulled, replaced by a flicker of discomfort. "Just a headache. It'll pass." She hesitated. "You don't look well. Can I get you anything?" He tried to wave her off, but the motion was sluggish. She stepped closer. "Callan, you're burning up."
he didn't argue.
Instead, he stood too fast and swayed. She caught his arm, steadying him. "All right," she muttered, already fishing her phone from her pocket. "You need to go home. I'll call your driver." But Callan shook his head. "Don't make a scene. Just help me get out of here quietly." They left through the back, avoiding prying eyes. In the private garage, Seraphina helped him into the car and gave the driver his address. She hesitated before climbing in after him. "Miss Quinn," the driver offered. "Maybe ride along? Just in case." She nodded. "Yes, sure." The car was silent for most of the drive. Callan leaned back, eyes closed, jaw tight. She watched him, strangely aware of how vulnerable he looked like this, stripped of power, stripped of distance. They were 2 blocks from his penthouse when the car suddenly screeched to a halt. "What the?" Seraphina gasped. Standing in the rain, blocking the drive, were 3 figures. A woman in a trench coat, another older woman, and a young boy clutching a teddy bear. Delilah Voss, Callan's ex-wife. And next to her, Irene Wolf, his mother. Before Seraphina could even process what was happening, Delilah was at the car door, yanking it open. "You little bitch," she snarled, grabbing a fistful of Seraphina's hair and yanking her halfway out of the car. "Hey!" Callan struggled to sit up. "You think I wouldn't find out? Bringing your mistress home like I'm dead?" "She's not." But Seraphina was too stunned to speak. Her scalp burned. Her face stung from Delilah's slap. "Delilah, stop." Callan barked. "Save it." "Ezra could have seen this," she shrieked, gesturing to the little boy. Seraphina finally pulled free and stumbled out of the car, drenched and humiliated. "It's not what you think," she said shakily. "He was sick. I was helping." "Sure you were," said a new voice. Jason Vale. He appeared behind Delilah like a bad omen, arms crossed, smirk in place. "I always knew something was off with you," he said. "Callan's been acting strange. Now I see why." "That's not true," Seraphina whispered. "You know that's not true." Jason just shrugged. "You really want me to lie for you now?" Then he turned to Delilah. "They've been sneaking around for weeks. Don't let them gaslight you." Callan's fists clenched. "You don't know what you're talking about." Delilah was trembling with fury. "I want her gone. From your company. From your life." Callan didn't respond. And that silence was all Seraphina needed to hear. She looked at him, really looked at him, and realized that sometimes the absence of a defense was the deepest betrayal. That night, Seraphina resigned. She packed her things from the apartment she barely afforded, turned off her phone, and booked a one-way flight to Isla Verona. No messages.
No will.
Just silence. It was better than humiliation. In the news cycle that followed, tabloids had a field day. The Wolf scandal. Mistress at the atelier. Online sleuths unearthed every photo she had ever appeared in with Callan, an accidental frame here, a background blur there, and painted her a villain. She never spoke, never fought back. Because who would believe her? She wasn't the heiress. She wasn't the CEO. She wasn't the mother of his child. She was just the girl who had cared when no one else had. The girl who had gotten too close to the fire and been burned to ash. The first thing Seraphina noticed about Isla Verona was the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the kind of hush that wrapped around you like warm linen. It smelled like salt and hibiscus, like things that didn't know how to hurt you. She stepped off the ferry with a single suitcase and no destination beyond away. Her phone remained off. Her heart remained broken.
Rachel heart.
Her college roommate and the only person who had messaged her, "Are you okay?" instead of, "Is it true?" wrapped her in a hug at the dock. Rachel didn't ask questions. She just squeezed her and whispered, "You're home now. For as long as you need." Rachel managed a modest resort called Coral Haven on the southern coast of the island, a boutique spot, full of coral stone and driftwood accents, nestled between palms and tucked into a cove tourists hadn't yet ruined. The kind of place that didn't show up in influencer reels, but was always booked anyway by people who needed to disappear. Rachel set Seraphina up with a small room in the staff quarters and handed her a uniform shirt. Housekeeping and front desk. Depending on what we need that day. It's not glamorous, but it's safe. You okay with that? Seraphina nodded. More than okay. In truth, she was grateful. She needed to scrub tile grout and fold towel swans. She needed to check in honeymooners and smile like she hadn't been publicly humiliated by a billionaire's ex-wife. Menial tasks were mercifully grounding. In the folds of routine, she could forget. And so began the quiet weeks. The first few mornings were hard. Seraphina would wake in a sweat, heart hammering with the echo of Delilah's voice, or worse, Callan's silence. Sometimes she dreamed she was still sitting in the car, her hair in Delilah's fist. Rain hitting her face as Callan looked on, too stunned or too spineless to speak. But over time, the dreams faded. Her hands found new rhythms. Her mind, new boundaries. She became Seraphina Quinn, the quiet one who worked double shifts and left tips for the kitchen crew even though she was staff herself. And still, she didn't turn on her phone. But one night, in the guest Wi-Fi lounge, she made the mistake of checking a hotel iPad left logged into Reddit. There was trending again. A thread titled, "Inside Wolf Atelier, What Really Happened with Callan and His Secretary." She clicked. They had her photo. A grainy side profile from the office lobby. A thread of sleuths had pieced together everything, timelines, footage. Even an anonymous user who claimed to have worked at Wolf Atelier and said she totally used him. She always wore tight skirts around him. Seraphina's hand trembled. She didn't even own a tight skirt. Rachel found her 20 minutes later, curled up in the staff kitchen with a mug of cold tea and a 1,000-yard stare. "Don't do that to yourself," Rachel said gently. "I didn't say anything," Seraphina muttered. "You didn't have to." Rachel paused, then added, "Do you want to know what's happening with him?" Seraphina shook her head too quickly.
No.
"I mean, yes. But no." Rachel smirked. "He hasn't made a statement.
No interviews.
No new assistant either. Just vanished from the social radar." Good. Seraphina thought. Let him feel it. Let him sit with his silence. But part of her hated that she still cared. One Wednesday afternoon, the island was hit by a short but violent tropical storm. The resort lost power for 4 hours. Seraphina was helping mop up the floor in the spa area when she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, soaked shirt, frizzed out hair, circles under her eyes, and laughed. Not bitterly, but the kind of laugh that reminded her she was still alive. Still ridiculous. Still surviving. That night, she finally turned her phone on. There were 138 messages. Some from old colleagues, some from journalists. A few anonymous threats. But one name stood out. Callan Wolfe. His texts were simple. I'm sorry. Please let me explain. Where are you? She stared at the screen for a long time before locking it again. Let him wonder. The next day, a guest in room 307 collapsed during checkout. A man in his late 60s. Heat stroke and dehydration. Seraphina was the first to reach him and immediately called for Rachel and an ambulance. When paramedics arrived and took over, she stepped back and felt a strange sense of clarity. This was who she wanted to be. Someone useful. Someone who didn't freeze. Someone who wasn't just decoration beside a powerful man. That night, she updated her resume. Rachel caught her in the break room. You planning to leave me already? I don't know, Seraphina admitted. Maybe. Rachel hesitated. There's something else, she said carefully. Someone's been calling here, asking if we have a Seraphina Quinn working. Seraphina's stomach dropped. Who? Didn't say. Blocked number. Male voice. Polite but persistent. I told him we don't give out employee info. Thank you, Seraphina whispered. Rachel placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to keep running forever. Seraphina looked away. Don't I? That night, she dreamed again. Only this time, it wasn't Callan's silence that haunted her. It was his voice. Say something, he had pleaded in the dream. Please, don't leave me like this. She woke up with tears on her pillow and her phone in her hand, glowing softly. She opened the last unread message. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm coming to find you. She stared at it for a long time, heart thudding. Then deleted it. But she was too late. Because Callan Wolfe was already on the island. And he wasn't alone. Somewhere on a bench at the East La Verona ferry terminal sat a boy with wide gray eyes and a stuffed otter in his arms. Ezra. And 20 feet behind him, watching the sunset with cautious hope, was Callan himself. He didn't know where she was yet, but he had faith the island would bring her back to him, even if it burned him again in the process. The air on East La Verona always felt heavier after rainfall, warm, thick, scented with moss and salt. Seraphina stood barefoot on the back steps of Coral Haven, a towel slung over her shoulder. Her skin still damp from the sea. She hadn't planned to go swimming, but sometimes her grief drove her to the waves, where she could scream underwater and let the current steal her pain for a few precious seconds. She was drying her hair when Rachel appeared, looking off. What is it? Seraphina asked instantly. Rachel hesitated. You have a guest. I'm not working front desk today. Rachel didn't smile. Not that kind of guest. He asked for you by name. And he brought someone with him. Seraphina's heart slowed. Her voice came out as a whisper. Who? Rachel tilted her head, studying her face carefully. A man named Callan. And a little boy named Ezra. The world tilted. Seraphina sat down on the nearest bench and tried to remember how to breathe. You let him in? He booked a villa. Under his own name. Didn't make a scene. Just said he hoped you'd want to see him. I don't, Seraphina said too quickly. Rachel didn't press. Then don't. Stay here. Let me handle it. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was she wanted to see him. Callan didn't know what he expected walking into Coral Haven. Maybe that she'd slap him. Maybe that she'd cry. Maybe that she wouldn't come at all. But he needed to try. Ezra sat beside him on the villa's porch, legs dangling off the edge, stuffing his mouth with the strawberry popsicle Rachel had given him. The boy's expression was blank, lost in his own world. Are you mad at me? Callan asked gently. Ezra licked the popsicle. Why? For bringing you here. No, a pause. Is she really going to be my new mom? Callan blinked. We don't know that yet, buddy. Ezra considered this. She's prettier than Mommy. Callan bit back a smile. Don't say that. Mommy says mean things. She said Miss Fina was a witch. Callan's chest tightened. Her name's Seraphina. And she's not a witch. Ezra nodded solemnly, as if taking mental notes. Then, are you gonna kiss her? Let's see if she wants to talk to me first, Callan murmured. But Seraphina didn't come.
Not that day.
Not the next. He saw her, though. In flashes. Crossing the garden to the spa. Carrying laundry. Leaning against the railing with a cup of tea at dawn. She never looked his way. On the fourth day, he left a note at the front desk. Meet me by the beach fire pit. Tonight. No pressure. Callan. It was stupid. Romanticized. Desperate. But it worked. Because Seraphina showed up. She wore a white cotton sundress and no makeup. Her hair was salt-wavy, her shoulders tense. She stood at the edge of the firelight like a ghost. He stood when he saw her.
Eat.
She didn't smile. Why are you here? Because I needed to see you. I told you not to find me. I know.
I'm sorry.
She folded her arms. You didn't believe me. Callan flinched. I did. No, you didn't. You stood there and let your ex-wife hit me. Let your so-called friend lie about me. And you said nothing.
He didn't argue.
He couldn't. I froze. He admitted. I thought if I didn't defend you, it would calm her down. I thought I could fix it later. There was no later, Callan. You let me drown alone. Her voice broke, and Callan's throat tightened.
I was sick, he said.
And scared. And ashamed. Not of you, of myself. I didn't know how to protect anyone. Not you, not Ezra, not even my own reputation. Seraphina looked away. The flames painted her cheeks gold. I came here to survive, she whispered. I didn't come here to be rescued. I know. I'm not here to save you.
He paused.
I'm here because I never stopped loving you. Silence. Only the fire crackled between them. I thought maybe if I gave you space you'd forget me, he said. But I couldn't forget you. Her eyes glistened. You brought Ezra. Callan nodded. He asked to come.
He remembers you.
Miss Fina. The girl who helped Daddy stand up when he couldn't. Seraphina laughed softly. Bitter and sweet. You never deserved that boy. I know. But I want to be better, for him. For you. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted a chance to say it in person. That I'm sorry. That I miss you. That I never should have let you go. She was silent for a long moment. Then, I'm pregnant. The fire crackled louder. Or maybe it just felt that way in the silence that followed. Callan stared at her. You what? I found out a few weeks after I got here. I was going to tell you, but then I thought, maybe the world had already said enough. His face shifted slowly. Shock, awe, guilt, fear, then joy. You're sure? Yes. His voice broke. Are you okay? I am now. He stepped forward instinctively, but she held up a hand. This doesn't change what happened, Callan. I know. You hurt me. I know. You can't just show up with your sad eyes and your son and make it better. He nodded, even as his eyes stung. But I still had to try. She inhaled slowly.
Deeply.
What if I'm not ready? I'll wait. For how long? As long as it takes. Seraphina looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time in months. And in that moment, she saw not the man who failed to speak. She saw the man who finally showed up. But they weren't the only ones watching. A shadow stood at the edge of the trees beyond the fire pit. Slim. Elegant.
Familiar.
Delilah Voss. Dressed in black. Expression unreadable. Phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low and cold. They're together. She's pregnant. I want her gone. Again. On the other end of the line, Jason Vale smiled. I've got just the plan. The sun rose over Isla Verona with a gentleness that belied what was coming. The sky was painted in cotton candy colors, soft pink, pastel orange, a faint blush of blue. It was the kind of morning made for coffee and silence, not for betrayal. Seraphina Quinn didn't know it yet, but this day would shatter the fragile peace, she had rebuilt. She stood at the edge of the shoreline, waves licking at her ankles, hands resting lightly on her still flat stomach. She hadn't told Rachel, hadn't told anyone else about the baby. Just Callan. And somehow, saying it aloud had lifted something off her chest. A burden of secrecy traded for the weight of possibility. Behind her, the resort stirred awake. She could hear the distant clatter of breakfast trays and the chatter of arriving guests. She closed her eyes and let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe, just maybe, everything could finally be okay. She didn't notice the camera lens in the bushes, aimed straight at her profile. Callan didn't sleep that night. After Seraphina's revelation, he sat outside the villa for hours, listening to the ocean, playing the moment back again and again. She's pregnant. He was going to be a father again. And this time, maybe he wouldn't fail. Ezra slept inside, curled against his pillow, dreaming of otters and cereal and maybe, just maybe, Seraphina. The boy had already started calling her Miss Fina again. Small progress. Fragile.
Real.
Callan texted Rachel early that morning. Can we talk? She met him in the kitchen, barefoot, hair in a messy bun, sipping black coffee from a chipped ceramic mug. I'm not here to scold you, Callan said first. Just to thank you. Rachel arched a brow. For protecting her. For giving her a home. For keeping her safe when I didn't. Rachel exhaled slowly. You know, she almost left when she found out she was pregnant. Callan's throat tightened. Why didn't she? I don't know. Maybe she wanted to believe there was still something worth staying for. They stood in silence. Don't screw this up again, Rachel said flatly. I won't. I mean it, Callan. If you so much as blink the wrong way, I'll bury you in the garden. Callan almost smiled. Understood. Jason Vale stepped onto the island 3 hours later. He wore aviators, board shorts, and a fake smile, just another tourist with a duffel bag and nowhere to be. But his mind was razor-sharp, his intentions anything but innocent. Delilah had wired him $10,000. Half up front, half after. The job was simple. Make her leave. Ruin her. Quietly. Jason had always been good at unraveling people. It was a talent. A sickness. A specialty. He checked into a cheap motel outside the resort, paid cash, and began watching. Seraphina.
Callan.
The kid. He took photos. Gathered patterns. Noted weaknesses. And then he made the call. Seraphina was on her way to the staff lounge when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Miss Quinn, the voice said. There's something you need to see. It's about Callan. Her stomach dropped. Who is this? Room 219. Come alone. The line went dead. She stared at the phone, then at the corridor around her. Rachel would kill her for going. Callan would panic. But something inside her, it wasn't fear, exactly, told her she had to know. She climbed the back staircase to 219, knocked once. The door opened. Jason stood there, all false charm and wolfish smile. Hello, Seraphina. She froze.
You. Come in.
Let's talk. I'm not going anywhere with you. He leaned against the doorframe. I have photos. Emails. Proof that your sweet Callan is not as changed as he says. She crossed her arms. You're lying. He shrugged. I could be. Or you could come in, listen, and decide for yourself. For one reckless second, she hesitated. That was all he needed. He grabbed her wrist and yanked her into the room, slamming the door shut. Rachel noticed the front desk was unmanned. It wasn't like Seraphina to just disappear. She called her phone, no answer. Checked the back office, empty. Then she saw the note, scribbled on a receipt pad. Room 219, strange call. Check if I'm not back by 1 o'clock. It was already 1:18. Rachel didn't wait. She grabbed the nearest staff member and called security. Inside room 219, Jason wasn't bothering with pretense anymore. He'd pushed Seraphina into a chair, hands gripping her arms tightly enough to bruise. You ruined everything, he hissed. Delilah had it all planned. The brand, the image, the legacy. Then you came along with your wide eyes and your fucking decency. She's the one who ruined her marriage, not me. You think Callan will ever choose you permanently? Jason spat. You're a phase. A placeholder. Seraphina struggled. You're insane. He leaned close, eyes wild. And you're about to disappear. There was a knock on the door. Jason froze. Housekeeping, a voice called. Seraphina screamed. The door burst open. Callan was the first through it.
He didn't hesitate.
He tackled Jason to the ground, fists flying, rage unleashed. Jason fought back, but Callan had fury on his side. Months of guilt, shame, fear, love. Security arrived seconds later. They pulled Jason off the floor, handcuffed and snarling. Seraphina collapsed into Rachel's arms, shaking. An hour later, at the island's small clinic, Callan sat beside Seraphina while a nurse tended to the red marks on her arms. You okay? He whispered. She nodded faintly. I should have known better. No, he said firmly. He manipulated you. Like he manipulated me. Like he manipulated everyone. Why was he even here? Callan hesitated. Then, Delilah sent him. Seraphina closed her eyes. Of course she did. I'm going to file charges. I'll work with the police. With attorneys. With anyone I have to. But I'm not letting this happen again. Seraphina reached for his hand.
I'm tired, Callan.
I know. I don't want to run anymore. Then don't.
He leaned in.
Stay with me. We'll make this right. Together. She opened her eyes. And for the first time in a long time, she believed him. But across the sea, in a penthouse high above Sable Heights, Delilah Voss was already planning her next move. Jason had failed. But she hadn't. Not yet. And she still had one last card to play. The news of Jason Vale's arrest traveled fast. Faster than Callan could have imagined. Within 24 hours, tabloids had splashed his mugshot across half the internet. Former Wolf Atelier advisor arrested in kidnapping attempt. It was messy.
Public.
Unavoidable. But Callan didn't care. Because Seraphina was safe. For the first time in months, he could breathe. She was resting now, curled up on the couch at his villa, a blanket over her legs and one hand draped protectively over her stomach. Ezra was drawing with colored pencils on the patio, humming to himself. Everything looked peaceful. But peace was a fragile thing. And blood had already begun to stain the edges. In Sable Heights, Delilah Voss watched the news feed with an expression carved from marble. Jason was supposed to be careful, quiet, controlled. Instead, he had turned into a headline. And now, all eyes were on her. She smashed her phone against the marble countertop, pieces skittering across the floor. Her reflection stared back at her in the glossy kitchen window, painted lips, perfectly pressed silk blouse, hair tied like a noose. She didn't recognize the woman anymore. She called a number she hadn't dialed in 5 years. The man who answered went by the name Ronan. I need something cleaned up,
she said.
He didn't ask questions. Jason sat alone in the interrogation room, one cheek swollen, lips cracked. He had said nothing to the police. No names.
No motives.
But when his lawyer showed up and whispered, "She's cutting you loose," something inside him snapped. "She sent me," he hissed. "Delilah Voss. You want the real story? Start with her." The arrest warrant for Delilah came through 2 days later. But by the time officers arrived at her condo in Sable Heights, it was empty. She was already gone. Back on East La Verona, Seraphina woke to the smell of lemon and salt and something baking. She shuffled into the kitchen, still in Callan's oversized t-shirt. "You're up," he said softly. "I'm up. You slept a full 9 hours. A miracle." He poured her tea. "Doctor's appointment this afternoon. Ezra's coming with us." She smiled faintly. "He's been different. Calmer. He asked me last night if the baby would be his brother or sister." Callan looked at her. "And what did you say?" "That either way, they'd have each other." At the clinic, the nurse smeared the cold gel on her belly and moved the probe in slow circles. The screen blinked to life. A flicker. Then a heartbeat. Callan froze. Seraphina stared. Ezra pointed. Is that it? The blob? The nurse laughed. That's your little sibling, sweetie. Ezra looked solemn. They're weird. Seraphina squeezed Callan's hand. He didn't look away from the screen. 2 days later. The knock came at night. Callan opened the villa door to find Rachel, pale and shaking. She's here, Rachel said. He didn't need to ask who. Delilah Voss sat at the bar of Coral Haven, wearing all black, dark glasses and a smirk, like a villain out of a noir film. She looked almost amused. I didn't come to cause a scene, she told Rachel. Then what did you come for? Delilah slid a folder across the counter. Custody claim. Ezra is still legally mine half the year. You're out of your mind, Rachel snapped. I'm within my rights. Rachel didn't answer. Just picked up her phone and dialed. Callan arrived 6 minutes later, flanked by 2 security guards. Delilah didn't rise. You look well, darling. Get out. Not until I talk to Seraphina. She doesn't want to see you. Delilah pulled off her sunglasses. Her eyes were bloodshot, her skin pale under the makeup. I need to say something. Just once. Then I'll go. Callan hesitated. Then turned to Rachel. 5 minutes. In the garden. You watch. Seraphina was waiting by the garden path, arms folded, expression unreadable. Delilah approached slowly, heels silent on the stone. You look maternal, Delilah said. Don't. Delilah held up her hands. I came to apologize. Seraphina said nothing. I lost everything. And I know you probably think I deserve to. I probably do. You do. Delilah winced. I was so afraid of being forgotten, replaced. You have no idea what it's like to build an empire with a man, only to watch him hand it over to someone else. I didn't take anything from you. I know. Silence. I loved him once, Delilah said. And I hated you for making him love again. Seraphina's voice was steady. I never asked him to. Delilah looked down. Jason turned on me. Sold me out. I have nowhere left to run. Then stop running. I wish I knew how. She placed the custody papers on the stone bench. I won't fight. You're a better mother than I ever was. Seraphina took them without a word. Delilah turned to go. Delilah, Seraphina said suddenly. Don't come back. Delilah didn't turn around. I won't. The next morning, a body washed up on the eastern shore of Isla Verona. It was Jason Vale. A bullet to the chest. Execution style. The island police ruled it a gang-related hit. But Callan knew better. Delilah had cleaned up the mess and erased herself in the process. At sunset, Seraphina sat with Ezra on the patio while Callan grilled fish. You know, Ezra said thoughtfully, Miss Fina isn't your real name. She smiled.
No.
Nope. Your real name is Mom. Callan dropped the spatula. Seraphina's breath caught. She looked at the boy. Ezra was serious, but calm. I decided. If the baby gets to have you, I do too. Seraphina pulled him into her arms.
And cried.
Later that night, as they curled into each other on the villa's bed, Callan whispered into her hair. Marry me? Seraphina didn't answer at first. Then, okay. The wedding wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. No orchestras, no champagne fountains, no floral arches that reached the heavens. Just a small terrace at Coral Haven, draped in twinkling lights and white linen. The sea hummed in the background like an old friend, and the moon hung low, full and soft. Callan wore a light linen suit. Ezra stood beside him, holding a ring pillow like it was sacred. Rachel officiated, mostly because Seraphina didn't trust anyone else to keep it real. And Seraphina, she wore the simplest dress she'd ever owned.
No val. No heels.
Just bare feet and the quiet strength of a woman who had lost everything and dared to love again. Do you, Callan Wolfe, Rachel said, grinning through tears, promise to never be an emotionally stunted disaster again? Everyone laughed. I do, Callan said, eyes locked on Seraphina. And do you, Seraphina Quinn, Promise to occasionally let this stubborn man make you tea and overprotect you while pretending it's not overcompensation.
I do, Seraphina replied, cheeks flushed.
Then, by the powers invested in me by Google and your total lack of better options, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Ezra cheered. Someone popped a bottle of sparkling cider. Rachel wiped her eyes. And Callan kissed Seraphina like he'd waited a lifetime to do it without guilt. 3 weeks later, they moved back to the city, not to Sable Heights, but to a quiet townhouse on the edge of Goldfinch District. Callan resigned as CEO. He appointed a new leadership team and handed over day-to-day operations. He chose a different life. Mornings now began with Ezra crawling into their bed, whispering, "It's pancake day," even when it wasn't. Middays were for Seraphina's OB appointments, garden walks, and reorganizing their tiny, sun-filled kitchen. Evenings meant lullabies, stories, and the kind of silence that didn't ache. Still, not everything came easy. Ezra had questions. One night, as Seraphina tucked him in, he asked quietly, "Do you think Mommy Delilah still misses me?" Seraphina stroked his hair. "I think she does. In her own way." "Why did she leave me?" Her throat tightened. Some people don't know how to love out loud, but it doesn't mean they don't feel it deep inside. "Are you gonna leave too?" She smiled, though her eyes were wet. "Never. You're stuck with me now." Ezra hugged her so tightly that her baby bump pressed between them like a quiet witness. Callan was gentler now. He no longer barked at contractors or typed emails like he was strangling the keyboard. He spent afternoons assembling baby furniture, badly, and whispering to Seraphina's belly as if the baby were listening. "Hey," he murmured one night. "Did I ever tell you that I used to believe love was a transaction?" She arched an eyebrow. "You mean like buying a latte?"
No.
Like effort in, reward out. That it had to be earned. And now? Now, I think love is more like a current. You don't earn the ocean. You just have to not drown in it. Seraphina smiled. "We swam through a hell of a storm. And I'd do it again." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Next time, let's just use a boat." The baby came early. Not dangerously early, but enough to send them into a frenzy of hospital bags, missed calls, and Ezra announcing to the entire OB lobby, "I think the baby's coming out of her butt." The labor was intense. Hours blurred into gasps and sweat and cursing. But when the cry finally came, tiny, piercing, undeniable, Seraphina sobbed like her soul had cracked open. "It's a girl," the nurse said gently. Callan stared at the wrinkled, furious infant in his arms. "Hi, sweetheart," he whispered. "You made it." Ezra named her Juniper because she looks like a forest fairy. They didn't argue. Weeks passed. The world calmed. Rachel visited and brought onesies. Ezra learned to sing lullabies off-key. Callan read parenting books with the intensity he once reserved for market forecasts. And Seraphina she healed, not just from childbirth, but from the burn of betrayal. The ache of being seen only as a scandal, a rumor, a threat. Now she was mother, wife, home. Then, one quiet afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a folded sheet of cream stationery, written in a hand Seraphina instantly recognized. "Delilah. I'm in Florence. Painting again. I won't say sorry again. You deserve peace, not echoes. Just wanted you to know. Ezra still draws otters. I hope one day, when he's older, you'll tell him that I'm sorry I wasn't better. You made him whole. And you made Callan human. I hated you for it. Then I envied you. Now I thank you." Seraphina read it twice, then handed it to Callan. They didn't speak for a while. Then Callan said, "Maybe some stories don't end. They just get rewritten." That night, as Juniper slept in her crib and Ezra snored in his spaceship bed, Seraphina stood at the window and whispered into the dark, "Thank you for not letting me drown." From the kitchen, Callan called out, "You say something?" She turned back, smiling. "Just thinking about the current." Spring arrived in Goldfinch District with the quiet authority of something that had nothing left to prove. Trees bloomed in soft pinks and whites, Balconies overflowed with hanging ivy, and the scent of lilac drifted through the open windows of Callan and Seraphina's townhouse like a whispered invitation. Their daughter, Juniper, was 5 months old and already bossy. She had her mother's expressive eyes, her father's scowl, and Ezra's inexplicable obsession with chewing on remote controls. Ezra, now 6, had taken to Big Brotherhood with surprising gravity. He read stories to Juniper, badly, but with flair, tucked her in with kisses, and declared himself her personal knight. Seraphina often watched them from the kitchen doorway, one hand resting on her coffee mug, the other over her heart. Sometimes she felt like a stranger in her own joy, not because it wasn't real, but because for so long she had prepared herself to survive, not to be happy. One Sunday morning, they drove back to East La Verona. Rachel was getting married. She had fallen for a local artist, a woman named Malia, who carved wind chimes from recycled glass and painted waves in impossible colors. They were perfect for each other in the way that people only become when they've stopped trying to be perfect. The ceremony took place on the same fire pit terrace where Seraphina had once told Callan she was pregnant. The air smelled like sea salt, sunscreen, and jasmine. Ezra served as ring bearer. Juniper gurgled through the vows. Seraphina gave a speech. She hadn't planned to, but Rachel winked at her from the altar, and suddenly, it felt like the right thing. She stood under a garland of ferns and fairy lights, barefoot in the sand, and held her glass up. "There was a time," she began, "when I didn't believe in second beginnings. Only in damage control." The crowd chuckled gently. "But then I came here, and I saw how an island could hold your grief without drowning you. How strangers could become shelter. How people who once stood in your way could turn out to be the very ones who show you where to go." She turned toward Rachel and Malia, her voice thickening. "You two found something rare. Not just love, but the kind that makes room. Room for each other. Room to grow. Room to mess up and still be chosen. That's what I wish for you. A love that chooses you even on the worst days." She caught Callan's gaze in the crowd. He smiled at her like it was the first time all over again. "To love that blooms again," she finished. "Even from ashes." That night, Seraphina and Callan walked along the shoreline, barefoot and quiet. Juniper was asleep in her sling, her tiny breath hot against Seraphina's chest. Ezra ran ahead, chasing crabs and yelling about monsters made of seaweed. "I feel like I'm dreaming," Seraphina whispered. Callan looked at her. "This real enough for you?" "I don't know. I spent so long expecting to be blindsided." "You were." She smiled. "Exactly." They stopped by a tide pool, watching the stars ripple in the water. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked softly. Callan didn't answer right away. Then, "Only the parts where I stayed silent, where I let other people speak for me, or let fear speak louder than love." Seraphina nodded. He turned to her. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you never came back? If you'd stayed hidden?" She considered that. "Sometimes. But then I look at Juniper's ridiculous little face and remember why I did." Callan leaned in and kissed her temple. "I used to think legacy was about buildings, headlines, boards, and profits. And now I think it's about the people who whisper your name with love after you're gone." She smiled, eyes glinting. "Getting poetic on me, Mr. Wolf? I've been corrupted by motherhood and laundry duty." She laughed, then grew quiet. "Do you think the past ever fully lets go?" Callan considered that. "No. But I think we stopped letting it steer." Back in the townhouse weeks later, Seraphina found herself writing again. Not resumes, not memos, but letters. One to her younger self, who thought survival was the same as living. One to Ezra, sealed in a box marked, "Open when you're 18. And one to Delilah, not to send, just to finish something unfinished. "You broke things." "So did I." Maybe we both thought love had to be loud to be real. But I've learned it's quieter than that. Softer. It stays even when no one's watching. She placed the letters in a wooden box, locked it. and tucked it into the top shelf of the nursery closet, behind the blankets and bibs and the onesie that read, "I cry like my daddy." On Juniper's first birthday, Ezra insisted on baking the cake himself. It was inedible. Seraphina cried anyway, because it was perfect. They all wore matching shirts that said, "Team Chaos." Callan burned the burgers. Rachel video called from Florence, where she and Malia were opening a second art studio. Even Seraphina's estranged aunt showed up with gifts and zero judgment. That night, long after the party ended, Seraphina stepped into the backyard and looked up at the stars. Callan joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. "You remember when everything felt like it was falling apart?" she asked. Vividly. She looked at him. "We're not the same people we were then. Thank God. But I still have fears." "So do I. You still love me? More now than ever." She took a shaky breath. "I don't want to live afraid of it falling again." Callan turned her gently toward him. "Then don't," he said. "Let's live like it's already bloomed." They danced under the stars, barefoot in the grass, no music but the quiet echo of everything they had survived. A mother who ran, a scandal that scarred, a storm that didn't drown them, a man who learned to speak, a woman who remembered how to stay, and 2 children who didn't need perfect parents, only present ones. And somewhere in that quiet night, velvet bloomed again. Not loudly, but deeply, like it had always meant to. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.